Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I want to talk about the fact is I recently, like literally yesterday, ended up finding out that Netflix is making a Sabrina reboot, which there's a lot to that. Well, basically, Sabrina's finally been cast, and it's an actress named Kierna Shipka, which I'm not familiar with her work. One of the things I was reading is she's kind of best known for Mad Men, so I've never seen Mad Men. I've only seen like bits and pieces. I've never sat down and seen a full episode. It's just one of those shows that's on the back burner. That's how I found out about it, and then I started reading into it a lot more, because prior to this I had no idea that Sabrina was, well, not prior to this, but until recently I had no idea that Sabrina was part of the whole Archie Comics thing. The only reason why I found out was because I ended up reading something sometime after Riverdale season 1 ended, which if you've never seen Riverdale, I recommend you check it out. It's a very good show, but just my opinion. Was basically, I was reading something that was like, oh, Sabrina is coming to Riverdale, but looking into this article, it looks like they were, maybe that was the intention. Well, not this particular article, but some of the stuff I was reading, it seemed like that might have been the initial intention, but then eventually it became a thing where it was like, no, like Sabrina's just gonna have her own show on the CW, but now it's been moved to Netflix, which is so interesting to me because like this whole, like for one, that whole thing in itself, because I forget, just like I've never known how big Archie Comics is. It's kind of like the Marvel and DC thing where it's like you never know who's associated with what. Like for DC, never knew Constantine. You know, for those out there, Constantine, you know, those weirdos. I never knew that was part of the DC universe until like the TV show aired and I started seeing DC Comics all over the place. I'm like, what? Same thing for Howard the Duck. My experience with Howard the Duck is like, oh yeah, like that 80s movie with Leah Thompson. That's about it. And it's like, oh, until Guardians of the Galaxy came out, I'm like, what? He's part of he's part of the Marvel universe. And then I start seeing like comic book stuff and I'm like, that what? Since when, you know? So it's one of those things, because I'd even completely forgotten that Josie and Pussycats was a part of that, because to me my only association with them, maybe the live action movie, which I vaguely remember, but like I think it's Hanna-Barbera, like the cartoons from like way back in the day, are like my only experience with them, much like Riverdale is my only experience with Archie Comics in general. So that kind of, I mean, to be fair, that's kind of like how everything comic book related is for me nowadays, especially superhero stuff. It's like the TV shows are kind of my only association with these particular characters and stuff like that. But nevertheless, I'm going way into a tangent. The point I want to get across is because of how vast the Archie Comics universe ecosystem is, there's so many like subgenres and subdivisions of Archie Comics that this particular run of Sabrina that the show is going to be based on is a series called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Because my only experience with Sabrina has always been like, I vaguely remember an animated series, but more so than anything was the sitcom with Melissa Joan Hart, like way back in the day. And it seems like this is not going to be that, because this particular run of Sabrina, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina it's a horror series, because there's a subdivision called Archie Horrors, which is that's kind of interesting, because there's even runs of Archie Comics where they're like kind of like a little bit more like darker superhero like series of like Archie characters as superheroes. Kind of like I said, like, because I thought Riverdale was an outlier in itself, but it's like, no, it might not be that detached from like what the interesting things they do with like Archie Comics. Like I said, it blows my mind just how vast it is. Which the whole prospect of that, like, it's kind of exciting. Like, to me, it's very interesting, especially if they're taking a very horror-esque approach to it. Because I do wonder, now that it is on Netflix, will that make them go about it a little bit differently? Like, I'm curious to see, like, because like I said, because it's based on that, it doesn't seem like they're going like the sitcom route. It's like, no, we're like, I guess you could be like, oh, it's a dark and gritty reboot. But I'd be interested to see what they would do with it, because like, not that it's horror-esque, but maybe they kind of go more of the Magician's routes with things, where things in the Magicians are a little dark and eerie. I was reading into the comic book a little bit, like I try not to read too much, but some of the stuff story-wise, I'm like, whoa, so they're gonna put that in the show? Okay, that's definitely gonna be interesting. Like I said, I'm curious to see like what approach they have, like maybe because it is on Netflix, kind of like the whole Marvel stuff. It's kind of how I brought it up in the past, like because it's on Netflix, like the TV shows, the Marvel stuff can have a little more freedom. So maybe now that it's on Netflix, this Sabrina thing will have its own freedoms to kind of go a little beyond what it might have been able to do on the CW. I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see. It seems like it's set in the 60s, in particular this comic book. But it's just because like Riverdale was, I brought this up when I first talked about the first season. It seems like it's very vague about what year it takes place in. I think that's just because of the whole Archie aesthetic they wanted to capture and bring it to life, so that's why. But nevertheless, but it might be set like, you know, a modern, you know, present day, but just with a, you know, Archie Comics aesthetic, the whole Sabrina situation. It's interesting enough because it's set in Greendale, which Greendale's popped up in Riverdale. They've mentioned it and they've actually been to it, but it's not a town you really go to that much. It seems like it's, I don't know, like, Greendale seems weird. It's kind of all right. Like, even in Riverdale, they're kind of like, yeah, no, don't go to Greendale. Greendale's that weird place. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was just kind of interesting. Like I said, I'd be interested in checking that out, especially if it is very horror. If they keep that element of like making it kind of spooky and her dealing with like the dark side of magic, and maybe there's more stuff associated with. Like I said, I didn't read too much into the comic book, but there's some stuff that's like, that's in a Sabrina comic book. Holy crap. I think it could easily be something that like could catch everyone off guard, even like in comparison to Riverdale. They might do kind of like that thing, like, cause Riverdale deals with the kind of like the teen drama, you know, love triangle type of situations, but also kind of like this murder mystery aspect to it. It's like maybe we kind of get something with that where it's like, oh yeah, this is teen drama for Sabrina, balancing her life as a witch as well as trying to play off being a normal person. Like, you know, I mean, much like the sitcom, but just in a like a possibly like magic and monsters type of way. So like I said, we would just have to wait and see. And honestly, I know that I'm sitting here wondering about it. It's like, does it technically count as a reboot? Because it's not, if it's not a reboot of the original like sitcom, it's based on, I guess, similar source material, but a different version of said source material. So I don't know if that would actually technically count as a reboot. Would it be a remake, or just would you just entirely think of it as like I mean, I think it should be kind of titled as like, nah, it's kind of like its own thing. It's kind of its own series, so it's not a reboot or a reboot. I don't know. I guess that's up to anyone's interpretation. I still kind of associate it as a reboot, but you get what I mean. My question to you is, what are your thoughts about this? Like, would you be excited about it? You know, a Sabrina the Teenage Witch like show on Netflix, but it is darker. Would you want that, or you just like, oh man, all they're doing now is making everything dark and gritty, which I don't mind, but it's just like the context of the fact of the matter is that comic book exists, which is also interesting too, because I looked into it a little bit. That comic book is still ongoing. It's fairly newish. So that's definitely going to be interesting, because I'm sure they're going to take a lot of liberties with the show. I mean, to be fair, that's true about every adaptation, whether it be based on a video game, a book, or a comic book. Like, you know, people always take their liberties when it comes to certain storylines and stuff like that. So, but I'm just curious, you know, what are your thoughts about this whole situation? Are you excited about it? Are you not? You know, especially if you watch Riverdale, let me know. Does like the fact is because of the way Riverdale turned out, like, are you like, actually I might not have cared before, but because of Riverdale, I might care about this whole Sabrina situation. So let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good